Hi everyone. Because I got both the first generation, this one, Torpedo Dynacord S, and the second generation, I thought maybe it's interesting to do a small video about some of the differences between the two machines. Let's start with the shift, for example. Shift on this one. You have a shift lock over here. You can unlock it over here. Because there is a bar running underneath, it's also unlockable with the right shift knob. Right, so this is the second generation machine. If you look at the shift over here, I can lock it, but I can't unlock it with the right shift. It's not a big loss, I don't really care. Another interesting difference is the Typebar mechanism. As you can see, everything over here on the first generation is down there, with the links all the way on top and accessible through the back. On the second generation it's completely different. If you look at the Typebar mechanism, we can see that it's all the way on the front over here, and then with a rod all the way to the back, so it has more linkages, it seems. It feels a bit heavier than the other machine, not much, but still noticeable. But of course this one hasn't been cleaned yet. Another interesting thing is the ribbon switch mechanism. They kept it the same on both machines, roughly, with some minor cosmetic differences. But the ribbon holding system itself, as you can see over here, has 1, 2, 3 pins. So you can only fit in there a spool with 3 holes at the exact location. On the second generation, however, you can fit in spools of about every generation as long as one of the holes is on the correct location. Looking at the ribbon system, you can see over here, turn that a bit, you can see over here that there's only one peg for putting a spool on, so you can use any spool you want, one with 4 holes, one with 5 holes, one with 3 holes, or 2 holes, doesn't matter. Minor cosmetic changes, and it's still pressure actuated, not with a ring system, just like on the other torpedoes. If you look on the side, we can see that the color selection mechanism strings from the top on the first generation. We can see that the action of the color selector has been inverted. Now the spring is on the top and the lever for actuating it is on the bottom. Another interesting thing about the shift mechanism is that they completely revised it. The first generation, it's this system, it's ball bearing, wheels all the way down there. Those last wheels give a lot of friction. I had a lot of issues trying to clean and fix that, but it's cleaned and fixed now. And then you also have this some sort of locking mechanism on the sides that's pushed aside, so you can't actually push the type basket down when it's not in the shift position. If you look over here for the shift mechanism, this is a lot smoother system, not so many friction points. This looks a lot like classic typewriters, I would say. It has a few hinges and it floats thanks to a lot of springs. The back panel of the first generation looks like this. So I guess they added some holes for some weight reduction. Over here it's completely different on the first versus the second generation, which was a bit of an issue for me to get everything sorted. Especially the ribbon vibrator mechanism. Completely overhauled, that ends up somewhere in between the key levers over here. On the second generation it's much more accessible. peering into the belly of the beast, you can see that it's still this thing for actuating a spacebar, but it's a complete different system. The tabulator system is roughly the same. A lot of things is now blued steel, which is rusting a bit, whilst on the third generation it's either aluminum or stainless. You can also see that the entire mechanism has been changed for the ribbon vibrator. And if I look at the bottom later on, you'll see that the rod going through the actuating bar is a lot more accessible, which is fortunate for the second generation, not so fortunate for the first generation. The escapement mechanism looks a lot the same, but on this one it's no half escapement or half space, let's call it. And there's also no little spring over here. Here's the escapement mechanism. As you can see, when I hold my finger on this one, other way around, it goes a little bit and then all the way. So this one actually has a half space escapement, which wasn't present on the first generation. Another difference I spotted was this little spring over here, which is not present on the first generation. Another thing I noticed over here was this extra cavity. I'm not sure why it's there. Maybe when something moves over, that dirt essentially collects over here. It's a possibility. On the right side over here, for the single and double spacing button, we have this lever over here and this rod over here. That's changed a tiny bit on the second generation. The mechanism still does the same, but it's slightly different. On the right side, we have the single double space mechanism. Instead of a metal plate over here with a rod, it's just directly the rod that goes to a similar system over there. Moving on to the carriage. Well, not too much has changed here, apart from some cosmetic changes. On the first generation, the indicator over here was plastic and it was missing on mine. So I'm taking the metal one of the second generation to put on here. This is your paper injector setting with how many lines you want. And this one over here is your carbon copy setting, let's call it. One is for one piece of paper, 3 is for 2 pieces of paper with a piece of carbon copy between it, and so forth and so on. So they still have the line advancement mechanism over here with an indicator over here on the second generation, but this number of sheets indicator over here is gone. They probably figured out that not all paper has the same thickness, so what they did was they just put A, B, C and whatnot setting on the control knob for that. Over here you can see the numbers go from 1 till 12, and on the second generation you can see they go from 1 till 60, which is a bit odd, but okay. This thing normally has a bottom plate that's installed like so, if I'm not mistaken. Yep, see, bottom plate with holes for the spacebar. That bottom plate isn't there on the second generation. This actuates the ribbon vibrator. With this guy over here connecting all the way back to the ribbon vibrator mechanism and the color selector mechanism, which is a pain in the ass to get fixed. And this is the belly of the beast. All these rods that are stainless or aluminum on the first generation are now blued carbon steel. There is no bottom plate. Let's call it weight reduction. They modified some of that weight reduction by having these back plates, which doesn't have any holes, with a big X. Similar tabulator system, but the big difference is this is your ribbon vibrating rod, and instead of having the actuating bit all the way between the key levers and causing friction if it's not positioned correctly, or it's a pain in the ass to set right when it's disconnected, it's running in an accessible section, and it's also locked in place instead of all loose points. So on that respect, it is a better system. I hope you guys and gals enjoyed this video. Yeah, keep on typing.